welcome to Decoding Devy. This is our first episode. I am Brandon Haye at Haye B3, and this will be on the IDP Guys YouTube channel, so please subscribe if you have not. There's tons of great videos on there, and also we'll be putting out the audio format, and I will be the host this week, and I'll be bringing on a special guest each week. So I want to thank Rich at Fanatics_Rich for joining me tonight. Rich, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. Hey, I really appreciate you having me on here. And then when you told me that this was actually going to be your first episode, I was like, whoa, hey, no pressure or anything. But hey, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem, man. I know we just like met face to face I think it was last week when we were doing the Devy dashboard, one of the huddle shows. So yeah. It's always nice to put a face with a name. So let's get into it. Last week, Michigan played Penn State in a very boring, typical Big Ten game, little scoring.
I tell you.
Yeah. So what were your thoughts on the game?
So, I mean, it was really tough to watch. We were talking about this beforehand. And so obviously you're a Michigan fan and I'm a Penn State fan. And I mean, just watching it, it was rough. Penn State couldn't really get anything going to the fourth quarter. It's almost like Michigan didn't want to win the game. It was rough. Thankfully, I mean, Clifford was able to bring them back to at least take the lead in the fourth quarter, make it interesting. And then our defense, I mean, we were on the field for so many plays that we just let you guys march right down the field. So, I mean, it was a rough loss for Penn State. How are you feeling about the Wolverines?
So, yeah, we were talking about this before the show. I felt like the first quarter, Penn State pretty much dominated the game with plays and yards. They got the first field goal. And then I want to get your opinion on that fake field goal attempt. I thought it was crazy. I was like, I don't know what they're doing.
So, like, I mean, so these trick plays, they work every once in a while. You try to catch the defense off guard. So the same drive, they pull the fake punt. Brilliant. Outstanding. Why are you pulling a fake field goal now? Like, take the points. Like, get on the board, take the points. Let's get this train rolling. You know what I mean? But I mean, it is what it is. I mean, they tried it. I mean, it just didn't work out.
Right. Yeah, I think definitely Penn State showed some glaring weaknesses that Michigan has, especially with any time a team goes up tempo and with Parker Washington and Jahan Dotson, they were able to get them out in space. And to me, all that says to me is Ohio State's receivers are going to have a heyday, and with their up tempo. So that was a problem. And it just seemed like Penn State, I want to ask you too, is it just they don't have the running backs right now to get that running game going? Is it the offensive line? Because normally they have a good running game, and if they weren't running with Clifford, there really wasn't much going on for them.
Yeah, Noah Cain has been a huge disappointment. I mean, we hoped that he could step in for Journey Brown last year. He got hurt in the first game. And then, we had big hopes for him this year, and he just hasn't panned out. So, I mean, they have Kayvon Lee, they got Lovett, but I mean, they're not your typical Penn State workhorse backs, I mean, they got a guy coming in next year, high recruit. So hopefully things are able to change next year. And then Clifford being banged up, he can't really provide any of that running game, to take the stress off the running backs. So, I mean, they've just struggled with that all year.
Right. Yeah. So it was definitely, an up and down game. I think if Penn State, when they got that fumble in the fourth quarter, if they scored a touchdown there instead of a field goal, I don't necessarily know if Michigan comes back. And I thought Michigan scored too early with, a little over 3 minutes to go. I thought Penn State would at least get down the field and, make it a little tougher. But, it seemed at that point Clifford just had nothing left in the tank, and he just, wasn't able to connect with any of those receivers.
Yeah, I mean, when they got that fumble, you could see the momentum shift. The crowd was going crazy. Penn State was hyped. I think you're right. I think if they punch that in for a touchdown, that keeps the momentum on their side. But I think the fact that Michigan held them to a field goal, the momentum swung back to Michigan. You know what I mean? And I mean, that gave them hope. And then they had that big play, and I mean, it was done. As soon as that big play happened, I was like, that's the end of the game.
Yeah, I can't believe he scored on that play. But
yeah.
Also another thing that frustrated me was kind of like the Michigan State game. You know, they were up. They were up on Penn State. You score to go up. You know, whatever it was, 21-6. I think the game's over because Penn State couldn't score, but Michigan continually just punch it in. Same against Michigan State, and I think that's always been their problem with Hunter Harbaugh. When they do get the lead on teams, they can't close them out. They go super competitive. So, you know, that was a problem there. So just to kind of finish up with that game, let me get your opinion. What is your feelings on Franklin at Penn State? When is it truly time for change? I know they had those recruits, those high recruits with Drew Aller coming in next year with those running backs. I mean, obviously, I'm guessing they're going to give him a year or two with that. But, I mean, what are your feelings about him and the program?
Yeah, so my biggest gripe with Franklin is his game management is one thing. He makes some poor in-game decisions. And then also he hasn't been able to bring in that quarterback. You know, I mean, to be effective in the Big Ten or any big-time conference, you need a big-time quarterback, right? So he's able to bring in Drew Aller. I think that gives him at least next year and the year after to develop him. One thing I will say about Franklin is he can develop talent. I mean, he's had quite a few offensive players go to the NFL, and I mean, Penn State's always known for their defense. So he can develop talent. It's really the in-game management is my biggest issue with him. But I think he gets 2 years with Aller and Singleton. They've also got a couple of high recruit wide receivers coming in as well.
No, I tend to agree. I've always said that I think James Franklin is a hell of a recruiter. He can develop some talent, but in game, there's lacks. I know a couple of times against Ohio State, you know, they've had him on the ropes and they've lost those games. And one last thing I wanted to kind of ask you, because I mean, very similar. They've put both of their teams, you know, in places to compete with Ohio State and Franklin and Harbaugh. Is really the only difference between them that 2016 year where Franklin was able to beat Ohio State and to get that Big Ten lifted up, and Harbaugh now is 4-3 against Franklin. Franklin's 59-26, which is 69% since Harbaugh's become the coach. Harbaugh's 58-23, 74%, very close. So, I mean, to me, it really is just that blocked field goal game against Ohio State and winning that Big Ten championship, which is just crazy. Just that blocked field goal, and then Michigan that year they had that fourth down and inches against Ohio State in overtime. It's so crazy how their two perceptions would be so swapped just with those two plays.
Yeah, I mean, and Michigan, you know, Michigan fans, Michigan alumni, beating Penn State is nothing. It doesn't matter to Michigan. The only thing that matters is beating Ohio State. You know what I mean? So Jim Harbaugh was brought in to beat Ohio State. He was also brought in to develop a quarterback. He hasn't done that. I'm hoping, I mean, I'm not a Michigan fan, but, you know, fantasy purposes, I'm hoping that J.J. McCarthy is his saving grace moving forward, you know, next year and beyond. I mean, they have a heck of a team this year. One game doesn't define any team. You know what I mean? Like I said, Penn State is known for their defense. It's in Happy Valley. I mean, going in, we knew it was going to be a tough game, but you guys won. You know what I mean? A win's a win. Now you move on, and then later in the season, obviously, you got to take care of Ohio State if you can. I think it'll be a good game because it's a rivalry game.
I am hoping it will be, and you know, even though Ohio State, you know, put it on Purdue, I think they do have more weaknesses than they have in the past. So. But in that game, always they focus in on Michigan. You know, that's their main priority. I think that's been the biggest difference. They don't have letdowns against Michigan, where Michigan sometimes does that. So yeah, that'll be interesting. So we've talked enough about that game. Let's
move on.
Let's move on. Yeah, so let's talk about Oklahoma. They finally lost. They've been flirting with it, all year. I did not think they would lose that game. I definitely didn't think they would lose it that way and scoring that little amount of points. We thought that Caleb Williams coming in, he's kind of changing that. So what do you think is really up with Oklahoma this year? I mean, he's had different quarterbacks in Baker, Murray, Hurts, bringing in a new quarterback each year, and that offense has always been humming, but the past year it hasn't.
Right.
Do you think teams are finally caught up to him, or what do you think is going on?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't necessarily think that they're catching up to him. At that level, obviously, you're always going to have to start making adjustments. But I mean, also we have to give credit to Baylor. Baylor has been an outstanding team all year. On the road at Baylor. For some reason, it seems as though Lincoln Riley is not scheming his wide receivers open. It seems as he's getting very lazy with his play calling. Marvin Mims has been non-existent all season long. Now, obviously, that some of that can be placed on Rattler from earlier in the year. I mean, once you go to Caleb Williams, he's a true freshman. He's going to have growing pains. I mean, he can have these outstanding games, but he's still a true freshman. He's got to learn on the job. So like you said, I mean, they've been flirting with this. Their defense had been playing well of late, but there's still times where they go through and for some reason they forget to tackle, but I think this was a huge game. And I think Baylor deserves a lot of credit too. They've been playing really, really well this year. So I mean, it's kind of a combination of everything.
No, I agree, and there are definitely some pieces on that team that I really like. I don't know if it was you that I talked about the Tyquan Thornton with, but I really like him, and Bohannon seems to he has some mobility. He has, kind of more of a game manager, but he can get the ball out, and they have that great running game, and as you said, the defense. It's just so interesting because now everyone pretty much has written Oklahoma off to even, get in the playoff because of that loss. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting how the Big 12 really works itself out. So to continue on the Big 12, Texas took another hit in that loss to Kansas. Yep. They made it a game, so that was something. But one thing I know it's only a couple of games, but is Kansas kind of building something? They stayed in that game with Oklahoma. They beat Texas. Devin Neal looks really good, a really, really good freshman that's starting to do that. I know they had the coach from Buffalo last year coming in, and maybe he's starting to get some of that culture. So they're never probably going to be able to compete in that conference. But do you think they might be, moving up from the bottom now?
I tell you, when that game was going on, and I saw that they had 40 at one point, it was 42 to like 24 or whatever. I was like, you know what, Kansas is building something. I really like their coach Leopold. He built up Buffalo, and then obviously moving here to a bigger, a bigger school. Kansas obviously isn't known for football, but Devin Neal is a beast. That quarterback that they have there is played really well too. I think he brought a bunch of offensive linemen from Buffalo when he went there as well. If I'm a Kansas fan, I'd be excited. I mean, I think that they're going in the right direction, for sure.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting how the Big 12 kind of works itself out since Texas and Oklahoma are leaving. Bringing some teams. So since those top two teams are gone, they might be able to even move up further. If they get some progress, who knows what the Big 12 will really be. Say for the playoff, because they were losing those two marquee teams. We still have to see how that works itself out, but definitely something to take notice of. And if Kansas gets better, that can only be even make Daniel's value even go up more. If they're not losing by 30 points every game, he can keep on getting the ball and start to really gain some momentum, which he really has the past few games. And the last college game I wanted to talk about is next week's game. It is the big one, Michigan State versus Ohio State. It's a game I wish that both teams could tie. Both teams could all all break their legs. It's always hard for me to watch that game because I don't want either to win. Do you think Sparty has a chance in this game?
I think yes, I do. I think they have a chance. Like you said earlier, Ohio State is vulnerable. They do have some holes. I think if they are able to get Kenneth Walker going, control the ball, kind of shorten the game. You know what I mean? Win that time of possession. I mean, they have a good defense. You're going to give up points to Ohio State. It's just, can Michigan hold the ball long enough to limit their offensive possessions? You know what I mean? If Kenneth Walker plays well, and he starts chewing up that defense and chewing up time, they definitely have a chance.
I agree that I think Kenneth Walker is going to get his. I kind of talked about this with Matthew Bruning at Campus Canton about Michigan State. Really, their pass defense is not very good. They allowed Michigan to almost pass for 400 yards, which I still don't know how that happened, because they are not a good passing offense as we've seen. So, just my thinking, Ohio State's passing offense is way better. They have better receivers. They have a better quarterback. They have a better scheme. So even if Kenneth Walker, say has 150 yards, a couple of touchdowns, I just think Ohio State is going to be able to outscore them. And I just don't think running the ball, they're going to be able to necessarily keep up with them. They have some good playmakers out wide too.
But Jaden Reed and Naylor.
Yeah, I don't think Naylor's going to be back. I'm not totally sure, because I know he was wearing a cast.
Right.
So that really hurts them. But Reed is very good. He's a great player. And Peyton Thorne is good too. He had a rough game against Michigan, but I don't think Ohio State has the pass rushing ability that Michigan does. No. So he should be able to do some things. I think you'll be able to see pretty early on. I don't think Michigan State can go in full early like they did against Michigan. I think against Ohio State, they need to keep that within the possession, because it's going to be hard to come back against those receivers and everything. So that'll be a very good game. I kind of look to next week, and there aren't a lot of good matchups next week. So that's probably one of the bigger ones. And there's not really, as many matchups next week. So that'll be the marquee one. So now we'll go into some Devy talk. And for anyone that doesn't know, Devy is a fantasy football type league where not only do you have a rookie draft, but you have a Devy draft each year. It depends on how many players, or how many rounds. And then you pick a player in college, say they can be a freshman, sophomore, as long as they're not going into the NFL draft. And whenever that player does go into the NFL, you automatically get them onto their team. So it's a kind of a growing section of fantasy football. And one thing I noticed this year, what I was having a hard time doing, is where do you put incoming freshmen in kind of the rankings of all the college players compared to players already in college? For example, Travion Henderson. We all knew he was going to be really good. I didn't think he'd be this good this fast. But, those highly talented freshmen, like, where do they really come in, and how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, so – Devy's tough, because you have to wait until they're in the NFL to actually get production from them, So obviously they have to go through at least 3 years of college prior to getting to your actual fantasy team. Generally I go with the older class, right? So I'll go with the juniors, or I'll go with the sophomores. Very rarely will I dip into the freshmen unless it's somebody like Travion. You know what I mean? But even then, I'm going to take, like this year, I would have still taken Brees, Spiller, Bijan, probably Jahmyr Gibbs before him, only because, those guys are going to get to my rosters sooner. You know what I mean? I could take Henderson, and I'm not wishing this on anybody. Something happens along the way and he never even pans out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I think it depends on strategy too, because some people kind of take a lot of the Devy players. I've been in leagues where they are punting for maybe a year or two. So when there's a player like that, but like you said, especially with waiting 3 years, you really don't know what's going to happen. and everything, but he's such a talent. He's one of those generational, at least at what he looks like now, that he could be that type of player. And I think it's harder. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say even then, like you said, it kind of goes into your draft strategy, So I try to even out my positions, so I get a couple each year, So say I have two 2022 running backs coming in, then I'll shift to 23, and if I have all those already, then I might look at the freshmen. You know what I mean? But if I'm short on my Devy roster, then I'll take the older guys.
No, that makes sense. And I think one of the biggest reasons why people might not jump as much on him before this year was because the 2023 class is so loaded with running backs, even more than we thought before the season, because Sean Tucker's moved up.
Yeah.
Zach Evans has really shown out, and then even Blake Corum's moved up the spot. So that goes probably 5 to 7 deep that probably aren't as good as Travion, but still they're going to get there faster. And in the running back wise, you want to get the running backs that get there the fastest because they have the shortest, lifespan really in the NFL. So I've always thought that's just the toughest thing to kind of look at, because do you go based on who's the most talented or who will get to your roster the soonest? I know there's people that on both spectrums that kind of look at that. So now we'll go into another player I really like. I know there's mixed feelings about him, but David Bell from Purdue, he should be coming out this year. I really like David Bell. I know a lot of the analytics people don't necessarily like him. Just what he's done in 2019, had over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. Last year in the shortened season, he still had over 600 yards, 8 touchdowns. And so far this year, 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns. And he's doing it at Purdue, same kind of thing that Rondale Moore did, but he does more down the field. And they don't have great quarterbacks. They don't have great weapons, with him. Where are you on David Bell as an NFL prospect?
Yeah, I love David Bell. So that big 2019 season, he was a true freshman that year, and that was the same year that Rondale Moore tore his ACL. So true freshman coming into a Big 12 or Big 10 program and just simply dominating. I have him as my wide receiver 3 going into this draft right now. I think that he is a day 1, early day 2 draft pick. I could see him going the top of round 2, similar to maybe T. Higgins. I think that he's gonna perform well at the NFL level. He has a lot of tools that the NFL is going to look for.
No, I agree. And before this season, I kind of liked Bell because of what he'd done over Treylon Burks, but Burks has shown more consistency here, so he's gone ahead of him in my book. Now he's 3rd for me also right now, with Burks and Garrett Wilson ahead of him. And so I really like David Bell because he's good when the contested catches. He is a good route runner. He's pretty strong, and he can do some yard after catch. He's not obviously as great as Rondale, but I know a lot of people don't love, I guess, his speed and everything. And my thing is, even if he doesn't go first round, as long as he still goes day 2, so either round 2 or round 3, that's fine to me. And the other thing on him is, people say he's not really an alpha or a wide receiver 1, but to me, he doesn't have to be, because the way the NFL is now, most teams have 2 very good receivers. And if you think about it, rookie-wise, that's really what you want. Just someone that is going to get on the field and can have some production. And his ceiling might be somewhat, obviously more limited than Treylon Burks. I think he's ready-made for an NFL team just because of his route running and everything like that. And I think a coach will really like him. So I'm still high on David Bell, not nearly as high as I was before the season because other players have kind of come up. But I'm still a lot higher on him than I know a lot of other people are.
Yeah, I'm actually the same way. I had him as my wide receiver 2, and I had Burks. I think I had Burks 3, but Burks' performance, I've leapfrogged him. I still have Wilson at 1. David Bell's just, he's crazy consistent. It's week in and week out. It's against the bad competition. It's against the really good competition. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who he's playing. He produces.
No, I definitely agree. So he's someone that I'm really looking. So let's look at a couple other receivers. They're not coming out this year. They will be eligible in 2023. Rakeem Jarrett and Quentin Johnston, both highly touted recruits, been somewhat inconsistent. Is it poor QB play? With Jarrett, he's really been way more limited in 2020. He didn't play that much. He just had that one big game. And this year he has 600 yards and 5 touchdowns by looked. And he played 10 games. In two of those games, he got over 200 yards. So in the other 8, he only has 400. So he's only averaging like 50 yards a game.
Yeah, actually, Jarrett was my stock down guy last week on that show that you were on.
Yeah.
So I mean, and it might sound crazy because he's playing okay. He's having a couple games over 100 yards, having maybe 60 yards here and there. But as a 5-star recruit, I expected him to come into Maryland this year and just simply dominate. I expected him to be their wide receiver 1, a la Josh Downs. I expected Rakeem Jarrett to have the Josh Downs season, right? So even the beginning of the season, he had that big game to start, had a couple slow games. That's fine. But when Demas went down, that's when Rakeem Jarrett has to step up. You know what I mean? He has to be that wide receiver 1 that he was recruited as, and he just has not done that.
No, I agree. And I think that you brought up Demas. I was looking for Jarrett to be Demas this year, like the go-to receiver, because I was all in on Jarrett this year at the bit, CTC drafts, everything.
Oh yeah,
even some Devy. I was like, this guy, and I thought Talia was going to make this big jump, and he's still inconsistent. Once Demas went down, that offense that team is really falling apart. So I am kind of worried about him. So, I would assume Talia's going to stay another year. So he has another year, but, I think it's concerning that he's not putting up bigger games. Whereas Quentin Johnston, he had 400 yards, 2 touchdowns his freshman year. This year, he's over 606 touchdowns. He's been more consistent than Jarrett and has had some really big games, but he's had 2 games where he's had under 10 yards in like 2 of the last 3. And I know quarterback play hasn't been great with him.
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned about Quentin Johnston. He creates separation like crazy. He can jump over people. He can run any route you want. I think Johnston is simply the quarterback. Max Duggan is not it. Morris played really well 2 weeks ago. I think he struggled this week. Johnston, I truly think it's the quarterback play, but he does have to. So next season, I think that he has to really ramp up that consistency. He's shown a lot of flashes, a lot more flashes than Jarrett, and I think that hopefully next year he can improve that consistency.
Yeah, I think with the main thing with Jarrett in his freshman year and what he's done this year, a lot of his big plays are where he's wide open. He one where. Like Quentin Johnston, like that Oklahoma game, he was mossing, various corners and making ridiculous, athletic plays. I think that's the biggest difference, because if you're running wide open, we don't know if that's, a coverage breakdown, or we can't really see the skill there. So that's definite. I tend to agree. I think with Johnston, you just would rather see it more often, but obviously too, TCU's been, going through up and downs under that team. So,
and I mean, he's shown that he can put the team on his back, if needed. You know what I mean? Jarrett hasn't, and I mean, even Johnston as well. Zach Evans has been out quite often this year too. So there's another weapon off the team, so defenses can kind of focus on Johnston.
I'm sure you've seen that Zach Evans is pushing for them to hire Deion Sanders. Do you think there's any way that happens?
So I don't think that there's any way it happens as long as Deion's son is still playing at Jackson State.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I think that after Deion's son leaves school, then maybe it's a possible, unless he's going to bring them with him. With the new transfer rules,
Right.
as long as you transfer before May 1st, you don't have to sit out. So maybe he goes to TCU and brings his son with him. That's a possibility.
Yeah, I just think it would be so crazy for Deion to make that jump right now.
He's been a huge supporter
interesting.
of Zach Evans. He's been a huge supporter of Evans.
Right.
I think he came out publicly when that recruiting stuff was going on and vouched for him. So, I mean, I don't think he leaves Jackson State, to be honest.
Since you mentioned Zach Evans, there's been obviously, some reports out and everything, and there's that report out that where he wanted to limit some of his touches, to preserve himself for the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
So, I mean, I think that it's a good idea. Look, so the biggest thing with these running backs when they get to the NFL is getting that second contract. You got a lot of running backs in college ranks that get 30 to 40 touches a game. And by the time they get to the NFL and the time they're done their first contract, they're done. So I think it's smart. And I think college coaches need to plan for that. They need to go into a game rotating guys. That way, second half, then sure, you can ride Zach Evans because he only has maybe 10 to 12 touches in the first half. You know what I mean? The days of them having 35, 40 touches, those are over. You know what I mean? Because, I mean, a running back needs to think about his future because obviously he's got the shortest career span in the NFL. So I think it's a smart move, and I think it's why he decommitted from Georgia because Georgia refused to agree to that, and I think Gary Patterson agreed, and that's why he went to TCU.
It's interesting that they did not agree to that because Georgia plays like a million running backs. So I'm sure they wish they would have kept, Zach Evans.
Yeah.
It is interesting, especially with all the injuries that Bijan has had, because they really ride him. So it's really going to depend on that, and with how the running back position is. Most running backs don't get drafted in the first round, even though I think they should, like DeAndre Swift. Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers, they didn't. So I think as long as you're a top 3 round pick, your running back, I think that's really all you have to do. Just get there. And I think Zach Evans has shown that he's good this year. And, you're right. You really should have 2 good like what Michigan does. They have Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum, and they run both of those. Probably they get 15 to 18 carries. Both of them get good yards, get enough plays and everything, and that's really what you need to do going forward.
I mean, and like you said, Georgia, the best running back on that team right now might be James Cook. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they rotate Cook, Zamir White. I mean, they're rotating guys. I mean, why can't other programs do that? Now, obviously, Georgia brings in a mass amounts of high level recruits, and they can do that. But it's something that coaches are going to need to think about moving forward.
Definitely. And the last Devy topic I have on is the quarterback position. DJU and Spencer Rattler, high-end Devy prospects before the year, both have really disappointed. I know, I picked DJU first in one of my C2C drafts. That is not going well because, I've talked to some people and I don't think I can trade him because you're getting still a little back. You just have to ride it out and hope he turns it around. So first, let's go over Rattler. It looks like, his time at Oklahoma is probably over. He's probably going to transfer. Where would be some places you think he might go?
All right. So we had this discussion, I think a couple weeks ago on that Huddle show. And for me, the ideal place for Rattler to go is Ole Miss. Okay, Matt Corral going to the NFL. If you could team up Spencer Rattler and Lane Kiffin, it's a match made in heaven. So obviously that's a high level one. Playing in the SEC, it's going to be upticking in competition. It's a chance for him to regain his draft stock. Now, a lot of people, when situations like this happens, a lot of times the player will go close to home. So he's from Arizona. I don't see Jaden Daniels going to the NFL, so we can cancel Arizona State. He's not going to go to Arizona because they just flat out stink.
I agree.
Yeah, so then you're looking elsewhere, right? So where else could he go that he can improve his stock? Texas. If he goes to Texas and then beats Oklahoma next year, why not? Team him up with Sark. And that's obviously that's if Quinn Ewers doesn't transfer. But then you got the two Southern California teams. You got USC, which I hope doesn't happen because I have a lot of Jackson Dart.
No, I agree.
And then you also have UCLA with Chip Kelly. So that's interesting. If he wants to go towards, near the big city of LA, UCLA is an option.
No, I agree. And I just think to rebuild his reputation and everything, I think he needs to go to a place where the expectations aren't going to be as high as Oklahoma, where like Ole Miss, where like 8 or 9 wins are okay, and he can still play some good competition and work on his reputation. Just because, this isn't good for the NFL, but maybe he just crumbles under that pressure. Because I know last year he did not play in some games that were very close. So I think that definitely might be a possibility for him to go to somewhere, or he can go somewhere in the Big Ten, middle level, maybe like Nebraska or something like that, where not the best fit,
Scott
but
Frost.
Yeah, maybe they can start something like that. So it's interesting with him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if he goes to Ole Miss, I think that Lane Kiffin is a creative enough coach to utilize his skill sets to the best that he can. Like we said earlier, I think that Lincoln Riley has gotten a little bit lazy with scheming, his play calling. Now, obviously, I could be dead wrong. I'm not a professional, but for me, it just seems like their wide receivers are not gaining the separation that they have in years past. So it'd be interesting for sure.
Definitely. So that's Rattler. And now let's go to DJU. Pretty much all the hype with him was about that, pretty much that Notre Dame game last year when he came in for Trevor Lawrence and threw it all over the place. And we saw, his size, his great arm. We saw that against a good defense. And we thought he was just going to continue it. And at Clemson, Clemson has shown this year that now that Trevor's gone, he, made up to him and Etienne, made up for a lot of the flaws that team has.
Yeah.
So do you think he can rebuild that at Clemson, or does he need to go somewhere else, or what do you think?
I think he can regain it at Clemson. I think so. I think a lot of this has to go on Dabo Swinney. Everybody has said it. They recruit the same type of player for wide receiver. They're all 6'2" and above. They don't have the Hunter Renfrow that they used to have. They don't have that guy in the slot creating separation. But at this point, I think Clemson just hit a perfect storm of disaster this year. His confidence got shaken real early in the year. That threw his mechanics out of whack. He was all over the place earlier. There's some effort concerns from players on his offense as well. People just not trying to catch the football. Not taking any blame off DJU. He's looked terrible. But I think this is about as bad as it can get for Clemson. You know what I mean? I think that if he stays in Clemson, has a really good year next year, regains that confidence, I think he can bounce back.
No, I tend to agree. I think that it's just crazy for me. I truly saw that Clemson was not the same Clemson when they were playing Syracuse. I think the game was tied.
Yeah.
They were driving for a field goal, and on 3rd down and 6, they just ran it up the middle. They didn't even try to score a touchdown when they were that killer instinct team before. And it was kind of like pretty much they're trying to run the ball, play defense, and just not turn it over. And it's just crazy about that. I agree with you on DJU. I think a lot of it is mental now. He's had so many bad games. They do not have a good O-line, and everything is just going wrong for him. So I hope they can fix that. But you're totally right on those slot receivers. Who would think they would miss someone like Hunter Renfrow or Amari Rodgers? That that much,
Right.
and they don't have that guy on the middle of the field. I'm surprised they haven't used when Will Shipley has been healthy, used him in somewhat of that role. I thought they would pass him the ball a lot more. I know he's been injured, but even when he's not, I've been surprised by that. I think they just need to relook at how their scheme, because they just need to change it. And I think, like you said, with the effort, they've been a front runner for so many years. So when those kind of teams have a bad year, a lot of those players aren't used to that, so they kind of tank it.
They don't know that.
So
they don't know that adversity. You know.
Right.
I mean, they had Trevor Lawrence bailing them out, and before that, they had Deshaun Watson.
I mean, yeah, they had a lot. They had a lot of good quarterbacks, back to back. So, and we thought it was with DJU. So maybe it's just an off year. I mean, I hope he rebounds, because he looks very, very talented.
Yeah.
I think you could, because everyone was just saying, oh, it was Georgia, and they thought he'd bounce back, and then he kept on, not looking good. So
no.
It'll be interesting. But so that's all we have tonight on Decoding Devy. I want to thank Rich for joining me tonight, and and we'll be back next week with another guest. So thanks, Rich, for joining.
Yeah, I appreciate having me.